Ethan Cale had always believed that curiosity was both a gift and a curse. It was what drove him to leave Earth behind and travel to Letheria, a planet that had only recently been mapped by human explorers. From orbit, Letheria looked like a living jewel, a swirling globe of emerald forests, sapphire oceans, and clouds that sparkled with iridescent light. The human space agency had called him a cultural observer, a polite way of saying he was to study the alien species called the Alari, gather data, and report it back. Ethan had brought along his most trusted tool, a worn, leather-bound journal. In it, he wrote everything he saw, thought, and felt. Sometimes the entries were dry and scientific. Sometimes they were personal, filled with awkward impressions he could never say aloud. He landed on Letheria with a sense of awe that never dulled, even after 3 weeks. The Alari were unlike anything he had studied before. Their skin shimmered faintly in the light, their limbs moved with a fluid grace, and their eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies within them. They were tall, elegant, and impossible to ignore. And then there was Princess Salira. Ethan first saw her at the palace reception. She floated down a crystalline corridor, her robes trailing like liquid silver. Every movement was poetry, and every glance seemed to measure him with quiet amusement. Ethan's pulse had skipped, not for the first time, and probably not for the last. He had written about her in his journal, not flattering lies, not even polite observations, but the truth as he saw it. He had described her tall frame, the way her skin caught the light, the faint hum of energy that seemed to surround her. He had written about her intelligence, her curiosity, and yes, even about the strange elegance of her form. He had convinced himself that no one would ever see it, that it was just words, a private record of his experiences. Ethan was wrong. It happened one morning when the sun's twin light beams refracted through the palace spires and bathed the gardens in soft gold. He had left the journal on a balcony while photographing a rare floating flower. By the time he returned, it was gone. Panic hit him first, then dread, then the hopeless realization that Salira probably had it. He turned the corner of the hallway just in time to see her holding the journal, her expression unreadable. Her fingers brushed lightly over the worn leather, and her eyes lifted to meet his. "I read what you wrote about my body, human," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made Ethan feel like a child caught stealing candy. "Care to explain?" Ethan froze. The words that had flowed so freely in his journal now felt trapped behind a locked door in his mind. He stammered, I didn't mean Salira tilted her head, studying him, as if she were examining a puzzle. "I find honesty interesting. Most humans would be embarrassed. Some might even lie. But you write the truth, even when it is awkward."
Ethan swallowed hard.
"I thought it would help me understand your people better," he said, the words sounding small and weak even to him. "I never intended to offend you." She floated closer, letting the journal hang loosely in her hands. "Curiosity can be dangerous, human. Some truths are better left unspoken. Others are meant to be discovered carefully." The hallway felt suddenly smaller. Ethan's heart raced. He had been trained for first contact, for diplomacy, for study. He had not been trained for being read like an open book by an alien princess. Salira's lips curved slightly. "You are lucky that I am curious too." Ethan blinked. "Lucky?" "Yes," she said. "Curiosity can be a test, or a bridge. I will decide which this will be for you." She handed the journal back to him, but her eyes held a spark that made him uneasy. "Come, walk with me." They moved through the gardens, the floating walkways twisting among luminous plants that pulsed with soft light. The air smelled sweet, like a mix of flowers and ozone. Ethan could barely concentrate on anything except that Salira had chosen to engage him rather than punish him. Why do humans write everything down? She asked, breaking the silence. Her voice had the softness of water over glass, yet carried authority. Ethan shrugged. It helps me remember, helps me think, helps me understand. And sometimes, it's easier to write the truth than to say it. So Lyra considered this. Interesting. On Lithyria, we share thoughts in ways beyond words, but I see there is value in your method. And honesty has merit. They paused at a small observation platform overlooking a waterfall that defied gravity, streaming upward in sparkling ribbons. Lyra floated near the edge, her hair catching the light like strands of molten silver. Ethan's instinct was to back away, but something about her presence demanded focus, demanded attention. Tell me, human, she said, turning to him fully. Do you write about all my people this way? Ethan hesitated. I tried to observe, yes, but I only write what I see, what I feel, what I notice. Sometimes it is imperfect, sometimes it is awkward, but it is always meant to understand, not to judge. Celera's gaze softened for a moment. Then perhaps your journal is less a threat and more a mirror. The word struck Ethan. He realized she was not only talking about what he wrote, but about how humans approached life itself. Humans were flawed, often clumsy, yet persistent in their curiosity. Perhaps that very persistence was what she found intriguing. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. Ethan's communicator buzzed, a routine alert from the research team. Unusual energy readings in the lower gardens. Ethan glanced at Celera, expecting impatience, but instead, she nodded toward the floating walkway.
Show me, she said simply.
They moved quickly, the garden path weaving through blossoms that emitted faint light and warmth. Ethan felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. Here he was, an Earth human, walking beside an alien princess who had just read the most private thoughts of his mind, and she was trusting him enough to include him in her world. When they reached the energy source, they found a young Ayalari child trapped in a floating cage-like pod, suspended by energy threads that hummed dangerously. The child cried softly, unable to escape. Ethan's training kicked in. He studied the mechanism, noting the energy patterns, the way the threads shifted with pressure. He realized that a small, precise touch could disable the field. Celera observed him silently, her eyes never leaving his hands. But because, with careful movements, Ethan manipulated a small device he carried, a universal stabilizer meant for field research, and slowly deactivated the energy threads. The pod floated gently to the ground. The child ran into Celera's arms, giggling, and she laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes in the morning sun. You humans are unpredictable, she said, smiling at Ethan. I expected clumsiness. Instead, I see courage, creativity, and care. Ethan's face flushed. I was just trying to help. And you did, Celera said. She looked at him for a long moment. Perhaps I was too quick to judge your thoughts. Sometimes words can mislead, but actions reveal more. The sun's twin beams shifted, casting long shadows over the garden. Ethan realized he had survived the first, terrifying step of human-Alari interaction, more than survived. He had impressed a princess who could have dismissed him forever. As they walked back to the palace, the journal safely tucked under his arm, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because Celera had not punished him. Dread because he knew this was only the beginning. She had seen into his mind, and that meant nothing about the future. Trust had to be earned, and every misstep could be catastrophic. Celera broke the silence again. Tomorrow, we will see if your curiosity is worth more than your words, Ethan blinked. Tomorrow? Yes, she said, glancing at him with a hint of amusement.
You will show me what humans can truly do, and perhaps why I should not simply read your private thoughts and be offended.
Ethan's stomach tightened, but there was also a spark of hope.
He had survived the first test of honesty, the first collision of worlds. And though he did not yet know the form it would take, he felt a growing certainty. Humanity had something to offer, the Alari, something beyond observation, beyond study, something real. As he retired to his quarters that night, Ethan opened his journal and hesitated over the blank page. What should he write now? He could record his fear, his relief, or the strange thrill of walking beside a being who could have ended him with a single word. Instead, he wrote carefully, honestly, and without pretense. The world is bigger than I imagined, and she is more than I imagined. I must be careful, but I must also be brave. This is only the beginning. Outside, the wind of Litheria shifted through the palace spires, carrying the promise of discovery, challenge, and perhaps understanding. The morning sun on Litheria shimmered like liquid gold, spilling across the palace spires and floating gardens. Ethan Cale felt an unusual mixture of excitement and dread as he prepared for the day ahead. Last night's encounter with Princess Salira had left him both nervous and intrigued. She had read his journal, confronted him about it, and yet had chosen to engage him rather than punish him. And now, as she had promised, he would face a test, a challenge that could decide not only his fate on Litheria, but also the perception of humanity in this alien world. He met Salira in the palace courtyard, where the air was filled with a faint hum of levitating flora. Her eyes, still sparkling with quiet amusement, met his as she spoke. You will accompany me today. Consider it a demonstration of human ingenuity, courage, and heart. You must show me what your species is capable of beyond words. Ethan swallowed hard. And if I fail? Failure is informative, she said lightly, as if the weight of the statement were invisible. But I do hope you succeed. Their first task was not what Ethan had expected. Instead of navigating formal meetings or diplomatic protocols, Salira led him to the floating gardens, a place where plants, animals, and light all seemed alive in a delicate balance. Here, the challenge would not be one of intellect alone, but of observation, empathy, and adaptability. The gardens were an intricate web of platforms and bridges, suspended over nothing but air. Beneath them, glowing bioluminescent plants drifted like jellyfish, their tendrils brushing the wind. Ethan marveled, trying to remember the instructions Salira had given. Observe carefully, react thoughtfully, and never underestimate the unexpected. Their first obstacle appeared quickly. A bridge of translucent vines hung over a deep chasm of swirling mist. The vines shifted as though alive, responding to weight, but not predictably. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, trying to gauge their movement. Do not rely solely on strength, Salira said, glancing at him. Balance and intuition matter more than raw force. He nodded, taking a deep breath. He remembered the principles of his training: patience, focus, and calm reasoning. Step by step, he moved across the swaying bridge. At one point, a vine snapped, sending a ripple through the structure. Ethan reacted instinctively, adjusting his stance and redistributing his weight. The bridge stabilized, and he made it across. Salira floated beside him, effortlessly. You have good instincts, human, she said. Most would panic. The next challenge involved a series of energy-sensitive plants, whose leaves reacted to touch by closing or releasing sparks of bioelectricity. Ethan had to retrieve a rare glowing fruit at the center without triggering the defense mechanisms. He studied the plants, noting the pattern of their reactions. Some closed when approached too quickly. Others released energy when brushed in a certain direction. Ethan realized the solution was simple but required patience. Move slowly, observe patterns, and act only when the moment is right. Using careful timing and deliberate gestures, He collected the fruit without harm to himself or the plants. Salira clapped lightly, floating down to inspect his prize. Clever. Humans are adaptive, it seems. You learn quickly. Ethan exhaled, feeling a surge of pride. The tasks so far had tested his observation skills and patience, but the next challenge would demand something more: creativity and empathy. A faint cry echoed through the gardens. Following the sound, Ethan and Salira found a small Ayalari child, trapped in a delicate, energy-suspended cage similar to the one from yesterday. The child whimpered softly, unable to reach the ground. Ethan's instincts kicked in again. He approached the cage, studying the energy threads. They were delicate, but highly responsive. A wrong touch could hurt the child or set off an alarm. He realized brute force was useless. Instead, he retrieved a small stabilizer device from his pack and carefully calibrated it to match the frequency of the energy threads. Salira watched silently, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Ethan adjusted the device, aligning the frequencies. With a quiet hum, the energy threads dissolved, and the cage lowered gently. The child ran into Salira's arms, giggling, and she laughed, a soft, musical sound that made Ethan's chest tighten. You humans are unpredictable, she said. You rely on machines, yes, but also on your creativity and courage. It was one thing to study alien life from a distance. It was another to save it. This, he realized, might be what Salira meant by showing human heart. Their journey through the gardens continued. Salira led him to a field of crystalline plants that refracted light into complex patterns. At first it seemed like nothing more than a beautiful display, but as they moved closer, Ethan noticed that the patterns were more than aesthetic. They formed a puzzle, a sequence of reflections that could unlock a hidden path to the next platform. He studied the patterns, recalling lessons in geometry and light manipulation from Earth. Slowly, he adjusted mirrors and reflective leaves, guiding beams of refracted light to create the correct sequence. When the final beam struck its target, a hidden platform rose, revealing a small alcove filled with rare Letherian seeds. Salira floated forward, touching the seeds with reverent fingers.
Few beings would notice the sequence. You humans.
You see details and act. That is commendable. Ethan smiled faintly, feeling the satisfaction of small victories. Yet he knew the final task lay ahead, one that would truly test the bond between human and Ayalari. As they approached the final area, a storm of bioelectric energy suddenly swept through the floating gardens. The storm had not been predicted, and it threatened to destabilize the entire area. Ethan felt the wind tearing at his clothes, the energy sparking dangerously around them. Salira's expression turned serious. We must work together. Alone, neither of us can survive this storm. Ethan nodded, adrenaline surging. He noticed a pattern in the energy flows, a series of pulses that could be neutralized with a synchronized counter-frequency. Using the stabilizer device and his quick thinking, he matched the pulses. Salira joined him, amplifying the effect with her innate energy manipulation. Together, they stabilized the area, preventing the storm from destroying the gardens. When the winds died down, both were panting, exhausted but unharmed. Salira looked at Ethan with an expression he could not fully read. You humans, you are flawed, impulsive, sometimes clumsy, but you are also brave, intelligent, and capable of great understanding. Ethan could only nod, too drained to speak. She tilted her head, her eyes glimmering. Do you understand now why I read your journal? Ethan hesitated. I think... Yes. You wanted to see if my words reflected my actions, if I truly was human. Salira's lips curved into a small, approving smile. Precisely, and I am not disappointed. Humanity may be flawed, but your species has potential. Something rare. The two walked back through the floating gardens in silence. the wind carrying the faint hum of life around them. Ethan realized that this day had changed everything. He had started it terrified that his private thoughts would ruin his mission. He ended it having earned respect, and perhaps even a kind of friendship, with the princess of an alien world. That night, back in his quarters, Ethan opened his journal. He wanted to record the day's events, but he hesitated. How could he describe the weight of trust, the thrill of discovery, and the first inkling of connection with an alien being in mere words? Still, he tried. I thought curiosity would be a curse today. Instead, it became a bridge. Salira challenges me, tests me, and teaches me that words are only the beginning. Actions. Actions define humanity. As he closed the journal, he felt the strange, growing certainty that the journey on Lytheria was just beginning. There would be more challenges, more discoveries, and more tests of what it truly meant to be human. And he would face them, not just for himself, but for the chance to show the Alari the best of what humanity could be. Outside, the light of Lytheria's twin suns reflected on the palace spires, casting shadows and colors that no human painter could ever hope to capture. Ethan leaned against his window, watching, waiting, and feeling, for the first time, that he was exactly where he was meant to be. And somewhere deep in the palace, Salira smiled, thinking of the curious human who had not only survived her challenge, but had shown her something she had not expected: the unpredictable, persistent brilliance of humanity. The Palace of Lytheria was alive with quiet energy as Ethan Cale walked through its halls alongside Princess Salira. After the challenges in the floating gardens, he felt both exhausted and strangely exhilarated. The tasks had tested his observation, ingenuity, and courage, but they had also shown him something far more complicated: the subtle, intricate ways the Alari measured trust, intelligence, and character. Salira led him to a massive chamber he had not seen before. It was circular, with a high dome that reflected light like water. The walls were lined with crystal panels, each displaying countless symbols and glowing records that seemed to float in midair. Ethan realized he was standing in the Alari archives, a repository not just of history, but of every citizen's thoughts, discoveries, and deeds. "This is where we record ourselves," Salira said softly, floating to the center. "Everything a citizen contributes, learns, or experiences is kept here. Transparency, accountability, growth. This is how we measure ourselves." Ethan looked around, awed. The idea of a society so open, so meticulous, was both fascinating and intimidating. He thought of his journal again, private and personal, and how Salira had read it. He realized she did not see his writing as a betrayal, but as a window into human thought. "Why show me this?" Ethan asked. Salira's gaze met his. "Because understanding is more than observation. It is immersion. To see the heart of a culture, you must step inside its most sacred spaces. And I want you to see what makes us who we are." They moved through the archive, Salira touching floating symbols that displayed holographic records of citizens' accomplishments. She paused at one showing a young Aolari solving a complex energy pattern puzzle. "Notice how our achievements are not just about skill, but about empathy and creativity. One without the other is incomplete." Ethan nodded. He could see the parallel to the garden challenges. Observation and skill alone were not enough. One had to act with understanding, with thought for the consequences, and the living beings affected. As they walked deeper into the archive, a small commotion drew their attention. A group of Aolari officials had entered the chamber, whispering urgently among themselves. Ethan realized with a start that he was being judged, not just by Salira, but by the court itself. These were the skeptics who had opposed human presence from the beginning. They had heard of the journal incident and the recent challenges, and now they were observing Ethan's interactions. One of them, a tall Aolari with sharp features and eyes like polished sapphire, stepped forward. "Princess Salira," he said, his voice like wind over ice. "Do you truly intend to trust this human?" His people have invaded other worlds. They have curiosity, yes, but often at the cost of respect.
Salira turned to him, her expression calm yet firm.
He has shown courage, intelligence, and heart. More than that, he has demonstrated honesty. Perhaps you have forgotten that our judgment is not only of skill, but of intent and integrity. The Yalari official's gaze flicked to Ethan. Intent is not always clear. Actions may mislead. His words about the princess, they could have been dangerous. Ethan felt his stomach tighten, but he held his ground. I meant no harm, he said quietly, but firmly. Every word I wrote was an attempt to understand, not to disrespect. If my journal caused offense, I am truly sorry. But I hope my actions have shown who I really am. Salira studied him for a long moment, then nodded. He speaks truth, and sometimes truth is more powerful than perception. The officials exchanged uneasy glances, but none dared challenge her further. Ethan realized that Salira's support was not just political, it was personal. She had chosen to stand by him, and that gave him both courage and responsibility. Later, Salira led Ethan to a private chamber filled with floating orbs of light. Each orb contained a miniature simulation of an event, a puzzle, or a scenario designed to test reasoning, empathy, and ethics. Here is your next test, she said. This is not about physical skill. It is about understanding complexity, making choices, and seeing consequences before they happen. The first simulation showed a colony of Ealar struggling against a spreading energy storm. Ethan observed the patterns of their movements, the decisions they made, and the lives at stake. He realized that brute intervention would not solve the problem. Instead, he needed to predict the storm's behavior, guide resources, and coordinate with the colony's leaders. Using a combination of logic, intuition, and knowledge of human technology, he devised a strategy to stabilize the situation. The simulation ended successfully, and Salira's eyes sparkled with approval. The second simulation was subtler, almost philosophical. It involved a cultural dilemma. One community's rituals conflicted with another's, creating tension that could escalate into violence. Ethan had to find a solution that respected both traditions without causing harm. He thought carefully, weighing values, compromise, and empathy. He proposed a shared celebration that honored both customs, integrating elements from each culture. The simulation concluded with harmony, and Salira nodded. You are learning, she said. Humans often act without considering the consequences, but when you do, you see far more than your own perspective. Ethan realized that each task was a reflection not just of skill, but of character. The Alari valued observation, ingenuity, and action, but they valued ethics, empathy, and integrity even more. It was a revelation to him. Humanity had strengths that were subtle, not always obvious, but undeniable when applied with care. The final simulation tested courage in the face of uncertainty. Ethan found himself in a scenario where a decision could save many lives but risked his own. He hesitated, heart pounding, but remembered the lessons of the gardens: observation, action, empathy, and courage. With a steady hand and clear mind, he chose the path that balanced risk with responsibility. And the scenario concluded with success. Salira floated beside him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled. You have done well. These tests are not just for skill. They are for understanding. And you have begun to understand us. Ethan exhaled, feeling relief and pride. But the celebration was short-lived. The Alari official from earlier approached again, his expression colder than before. Princess, while this human shows promise, you must consider the council. Others may not be so forgiving. His presence here? It may provoke fear, suspicion, even unrest. Salira's gaze hardened.
I am aware of the risks, but I see value where others see danger.
Ethan Cale is not a threat. He is an example of what humanity can offer: ingenuity, courage, and honesty. We will judge him as we judge our own people, not by fear of the unknown. The official bristled but stepped back, leaving Ethan to digest the weight of Celera's words. He realized that this planet, with all its beauty and complexity, was also politically delicate. Every action he took, every decision he made, had consequences far beyond what he could imagine. That evening, Ethan and Celera returned to the floating gardens, now bathed in the soft glow of Lytheria's twin moons. The air was still, almost sacred, and the energy of the planet hummed around them. "Do you see now?" Celera said quietly. "Why I read your journal?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Yes. You wanted to see beyond my words. You wanted to see my actions, my choices, my character." Celera nodded. "Exactly. Words are fragile. They can mislead, but actions show who you truly are. And today, you have shown that humanity has something unique: the ability to learn, adapt, and act with both reason and heart." Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had come to Lytheria to study the Alari, to observe them and record data. Instead, he had been studied, tested, and understood in ways he had never expected. And in doing so, he had begun to understand himself and the strengths and potential of his species. As they walked back toward the palace, Ethan glanced at the journal tucked under his arm. It no longer felt like a private collection of thoughts. It was a bridge, a reminder of curiosity, honesty, and the consequences of observation. Celera floated beside him, silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice softer now, almost reflective. "Humans are unpredictable. You fail, you succeed, you stumble, and you rise again. It is fascinating. And it is perhaps why I am willing to give you the chance to show more." Ethan smiled faintly. "I will do my best, not just for me, but for humanity. And that," Celera said, "is what matters most." They reached the palace entrance, where the night lights reflected in the crystalline walls. Ethan realized that his journey on Lytheria was far from over. He had passed tests of observation, ingenuity, empathy, and courage. But now new challenges awaited. Political tensions, cultural mysteries, and the delicate balance of trust hung over him. Yet for the first time, he felt ready. He had proven that humans were capable of more than curiosity. They were capable of action, of understanding, and of bridging worlds through honesty and heart. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that the bond forming between him and Celera would shape not just his fate, but the future of human Aelari relations. The night settled over Lytheria, calm and radiant, but beneath its beauty lay the unspoken promise of challenges yet to come. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, letting the hum of the planet wash over him. He was no longer just an observer. He was a participant, a representative of humanity, and he would not fail. The twin suns of Lytheria were just beginning to rise, spilling warm, golden light over the crystalline spires of the palace. Ethan Cale had hardly slept. Though he had proven himself in the gardens, the simulations, and the trials of observation and empathy, he now faced a challenge far larger than anything he had imagined. A massive energy storm had formed on the outskirts of Lytheria, threatening not only the floating city, but the delicate balance of the planet itself. The palace was in a flurry of controlled chaos. Alari engineers and scientists rushed to stabilize protective fields. Alarms echoed through the halls, a low hum of warning that vibrated in the chest. Ethan watched it all, adrenaline and fear intermingling, realizing that this was the ultimate test Celerai had alluded to, the real measure of courage, intelligence, and heart. Celira approached him in the central command chamber, her expression serious, her usual calm confidence shadowed by concern. "Ethan, This is not a simulation. Lives are at stake. You will act with us, or the consequences will be grave. Do you understand? I understand. I'll do everything I can. The chamber overlooked the storm through a wide crystal window. The energy swirling outside was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Chaotic, unpredictable, and growing in intensity. The storm seemed almost alive, pulsing with raw power. Salira handed him a small device, a hybrid of human technology and Alarari energy manipulation tools. This will help you interface with the storm. But be warned, control will require both calculation and intuition. The storm reacts to intent, not just touch. Ethan took a deep breath. He thought back to the gardens, the simulations, the puzzles, and the children he had helped. Every lesson he had learned, every choice he had made, now mattered more than ever. Together he and Salira floated toward the outer observation platform, the wind from the storm whipping around them. Sparks of energy danced across the air, striking the crystal spires and illuminating the faces of Alari engineers below. The city trembled under the storm's force, but it held, fragile yet defiant. Ethan activated the device, and a subtle connection formed with the storm. At first, nothing seemed to respond. Then he realized that the storm was testing him, reacting to uncertainty and hesitation. He focused, steadying his mind, and began to sense its patterns, the ebb and flow of energy, the pulses that hinted at direction, the moments of vulnerability within the chaos. Salira's voice broke through his concentration. Do not fight it like an enemy. Listen, understand, respond. Ethan adjusted his approach. Instead of trying to suppress the storm outright, he began to guide it, channeling energy through the stabilizer while amplifying it with Salira's innate abilities. The storm pulsed angrily, resisting control, but slowly it began to respond, bending around the city rather than crashing into it. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat dripped from Ethan's brow as he maintained focus, anticipating each surge, each erratic pulse. Salira remained calm, her own energy weaving through his, providing balance and support. Together they were not just human and Alari, they were a team, a bridge between worlds. Below them, citizens watched in tense silence. Alari engineers adjusted their own fields in sync with Ethan and Salira, creating a coordinated effort that spread across the city. The storm's power was immense, but so was their determination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the storm began to dissipate. Its energy thinned, pulled and guided away from the city, leaving only residual currents that could be easily neutralized. The city shuddered once, then stabilized. Ethan and Salira floated back to the platform, exhausted but triumphant. Salira's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was no test, no judgment, only recognition. You did it. Not alone, of course, but you were the key. Humanity has courage and ingenuity. Yes, but also heart, and that is what made the difference today. Ethan felt a rush of relief, pride, and disbelief. He had come to Letheria to observe, to learn, and to record. Instead, he had acted, contributed, and saved lives. He realized then that this was the essence of humanity, the ability to face danger, make choices, and act with empathy and courage, even when the odds seemed impossible. The council of Ialari officials who had once doubted him now approached. Their expressions were sober but respectful. The same official who had questioned Salira's trust spoke again. Princess, he has shown that humans are capable of more than curiosity or interference. His actions have preserved our city and lives. We see now that your judgment was correct. Salira nodded, her gaze still on Ethan. Humans are flawed. They make mistakes, they are impulsive, and they are unpredictable, but they are also resilient, intelligent, and capable of honor. Ethan Kale represents the best of that potential. Ethan could barely speak, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. Thank you for believing in me, he managed. Salira smiled faintly, her usual mischievous spark returning. Belief is easy when actions prove it true, and you have earned it. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Ethan opened his journal once more. This time, it felt different. The pages were no longer just records of observation or private thoughts. They were chronicles of growth, courage, and shared experience. He began to write, "Today I learned that observation is only the beginning. Action defines us. Courage, empathy, and heart shape not only our own path, but the lives of those around us. Humanity has potential. Imperfect, yes, but undeniable. And perhaps one day our species can bridge worlds in ways we never imagined." Salira floated beside him, watching silently. "Your words are honest, and that, human, is why they matter. Actions may save lives, but words can inspire them." Ethan looked up at her, feeling an unspoken connection that went beyond language or species. They had faced challenges together, solved puzzles, navigated danger, and in doing so, discovered something greater than themselves, the strength of cooperation, trust, and understanding. As night fell over Lytheria, the twin moons casting silver light over the floating city, the palace was calm. Citizens whispered of the storm averted, of the human who had proven himself. Ethan realized that he had not only survived his trials, but had changed perceptions, forged bonds, and perhaps even altered the course of human-Halari relations. Salira's voice broke his reflection. "Do you understand now, human? Your journal, your actions, your choices, they were all part of the same story. Curiosity led you here, yes, but courage and heart carried you through." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand. And I will continue to learn, to act, and to be worthy of the trust you have placed in me." She smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "That is all I ask. You have shown us what humanity can offer, and that is more than most would expect." The next morning, as Ethan prepared to report his findings to the Human Agency, he realized that his mission had become something much more profound than observation. He had witnessed the resilience, intelligence, and culture of an alien world. He had faced challenges that tested every part of him, and he had learned the true value of being human. The ability to think, to act, to care, and to rise in the face of uncertainty. Salira approached him one last time before his departure, holding the journal. "Do you see now why I read this?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. "It was never about offense. It was about understanding, honesty, and potential. You have proven that your species can rise to challenges not with brute force, but with intellect and heart." Ethan took the journal, now more a symbol of connection than secrecy. "I understand. And I will never forget this lesson." She nodded. "Then perhaps this is not the end, but the beginning of understanding, collaboration, and discovery. Humanity has many paths ahead, and I hope some of them will lead back here." Ethan smiled faintly, feeling hope, pride, and responsibility all at once. He had come to Lytheria as a student, an observer. He would leave as a participant, a bridge and a symbol of humanity's potential. As the twin suns rose higher, bathing the palace in light, Ethan realized that the story of humans in Aari was only beginning. The world was vast, full of mysteries and challenges. But he had learned the truth. Humanity's strength was not just in its technology or intelligence, but in its courage, creativity, and heart. And somewhere beyond the floating gardens, beyond the crystal halls, Princess Salira watched, smiling at the curious human who had not only survived her tests, but had reminded her why she valued life, courage, and understanding across worlds. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, feeling the pulse of Lytheria beneath him. The journal rested safely under his arm, a testament to lessons learned, bridges built, and the unpredictable brilliance of humanity. He opened his eyes again, ready for whatever came next. The storm had passed. The city was safe, and humanity flawed but brave, had proven itself worthy.